I always ask the entrepreneurs that I mentor, I always ask them this one question. And this is when the light bulb goes on. This is that moment they're like, whoa. I say, if you're building the product, who's building the business?
I think what you've discovered is pretty interesting in general, and it's called the entrepreneur's paradox. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah. So the entrepreneur's paradox is a concept that I turned into a book that is is not something you're going to find in business school. It's an account of the 16 pitfalls. So every entrepreneur, when they're getting started, they fall into these 16 pitfalls, all of them, and it's a guidebook on how to climb your own mountain of success. And it's fun because if you can see the logo here, it's a Penrose triangle, but it also represents a mountain. And the paradox is that oftentimes when we think we're going up, we may actually be going down as we travel around the triangle. And to put it in more concrete terms, the true entrepreneur's paradox is what got you into business will actually prevent you from succeeding in business.
That is super interesting. What does that mean?
That means if we can take a real world example. So in my case, I started my first company as a web and interactive designer. So I was really good at multimedia and interactive design and started a company just building websites. That was my first company. And people were like, wow, you're amazing at building websites. And I was like, well, yeah, I am. And they're like, well, you got to start a company. I'm like, yeah, I do. And little did I know that building websites had nothing to do with building a business. And so, I continued to grow my skills, and then I started a company. And even I actually don't say this anymore because I don't want this as part of who people know me for. But at the time, there was an international certification, and in this particular technology, I placed second in the world out of tens of thousands of people for designing interactive media and websites. And so that was my skill. And the paradox is that I had to actually give up that skill in order to become a skilled business person.
So how do you do that? Well, that's like, because your whole identity changes as well, doesn't it? So you're
Yeah.
like, hey, I'm really good at this particular thing, like web design or whatever. And now you're like, shoot, I have to leave that behind. So I really have two questions on that. The first one being, how do you do it?
Great question. So oftentimes, like in my case, and with the cupcake baker and the guitar maker and it doesn't matter what business you have. Most people think, oh, my business is so special and so unique. And yes, it is, but it's the product that's special and unique. The business experience, the entrepreneurial life experience actually has a timeline. And if you tell me where you're at in the timeline, I can tell you what's coming next because the experience is so similar for almost every entrepreneur. And so getting into that process is the entrepreneur literally has to rip out their identity. Otherwise, they're going to be stuck in the swamp. And I talk about this analogy of wrestling alligators in the book. I talk about how every day we wake up and we jump in the swamp. We just start wrestling those alligators, and we don't realize that it's impossible to drain the swamp when every day we're eye to eye with the alligator. And so once we decide let's drain the swamp and we get out of that, all of a sudden we look up and there's this great big mountain in front of us, and we didn't even know it was there because we've been wrestling the alligators the whole time. We've been in that swamp, those alligators of angry clients, or trying to find the best web design or cupcake recipe, or instead, I always ask the entrepreneurs that I mentor, I always ask them this one question, and this is when the light bulb goes on. This is that moment they're like, whoa. I say, If you're building the product, who's building the business?
That's amazing. It's so true though. So the question that I had that directly follows that, you like led perfectly into it, is how do you replace, if you're the one that's building the product and you're like an all-star amazing web developer or whatever your skill set is? I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably struggle with this. How do you replace yourself in that? So how do you find someone that's going to be able to step into your shoes so that you can go and build the business?
Such a great question, because the first step is making that decision. And I've had people that want me to come coach them and mentor them, and we've sat down and I've said, what I do is it's a little hard. It's you're going to rip out your identity, put it over here, and we're going to install a new operating system. And I've had people say, you know what? I thought about it. I'm good. I'm totally good. I don't need that. And so the first step is just make that decision. Make the decision. I'm going to give up the accolades, the magazine articles, the awards. I'm going to give all of that up, and I'm still going to. Let's take the example of web design. Web design has this very specific process. You can still take that process and apply it to business. Or cupcakes have a very specific recipe. Take that and find the recipe for your business. And a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to have the same passion as I had when I was building the coolest websites in the world, or the most delicious cupcakes, or the coolest carbon fiber guitars, or whatever it is. They say, I'm not going to have that passion. And it's not true. Once they realize they can take that same passion and transition it over here, then that's what really sets it apart, is saying, number one, I'm going to make the decision. I'm going to be the business leader instead of the product manager. And then number two is creating processes. I'm really getting in and saying, okay, how do I duplicate myself? One of my clients is, he's an editor. He does, writing amazing. And he said, well, no, the reason I have all these book awards is because that's me. Right. And going back to, I'm the one that creates the magic. I'm the one that creates the secret sauce. That's me. That can't be duplicated. And if that were true, we wouldn't have universities. If that were true, we wouldn't have any of that. So really identifying what is the process that makes your secret sauce secret? What is the magic that you have? Number one, identifying those steps. And then documenting, that's key. You've got to document, and then teaching it to others. And once you do that, then you can step out of the swamp. Then you can drain the swamp, and you can start climbing the mountain to success.